This week saw the long-awaited publication of the Broadcasting Bill, setting out the government's plans for the future of television. Already, its proposals to sell off ITV franchises to the highest bidder have brought grim warnings of declining standards. People on both sides of the debate seem to be agreed that the bill represents a revolution in British broadcasting. But does it? In fact, it will be 1993 before television looks any different. ITV will become a new regional network, Channel 3. This new-look ITV will be regulated by the Independent Television Commission, or ITC, which replaces the existing IBA. Certainly, the tougher commercial environment of the 90s will create new pressures on both Channel 3 and Channel 4. But how far have both already adjusted to economic realities? Later in the programme, I'll be talking to some of the people closely involved in the future of commercial television about how the government's plans will affect the programmes we all watch. But first, how was this week's bill received inside ITV?
How much you want to do?
Her Majesty's Stationery Office, Central London, last Thursday afternoon. Copies of the long-awaited Broadcasting Bill go on sale for the first time, and trade is brisk.
We all still got
I'll take 20.
Nowhere were copies of the bill more eagerly awaited than at the offices of the ITV Association, where heads of many of the ITV companies were standing by to learn their fate.
So no newspaper can hold more than 20% in a Channel 3 service or Channel 5.
I didn't read it. Well, you may read it.
Given how close the bill is to last November's White Paper, few people around the table could have been too surprised at what it contains. But surprising or not, the bill is undoubtedly a landmark in the history of independent television.
I think we must be just about ready to link up with London. It must be just a matter of seconds before the northern region adds itself to the independent television network.
The system, which many think is now facing its biggest ever crisis, first came into existence 34 years ago. Like the current bill, the act which set up ITV was intended to extend the choice of programming available to viewers.
The signal is coming up clearly, he says. We're getting the network on our monitors beautifully.
ITV was launched in 1955 to provide competition with the BBC. The BBC had always given the public what it thought the public ought to have, and not what the public wanted. The result of this was that ITV immediately deprived the BBC of 2/3 of the audience. 2/3 of viewers switched to ITV. There was a financial crisis in ITV in 1956 when the whole system nearly collapsed because the advertisers were slow in supporting it. But after that, a great deal of money was made.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to Double Your Money.
All right, sir. I want you to turn around so that you can see all our nice friends in the audience, our nice friends at home. Sir, first question, what is your name?
Mr. Harding.
Mr. Harding.
Progressively, as the finances improved and people like Lord Thompson of Scottish Television were able to claim that he held a license to print money, people became alarmed and said, no, this has gone too far and there must be much more serious programming. And progressively, there was.
So in a perverse sort of way, you had the BBC competing very effectively as the years went by, and you had the IBA trying to realise through its ITV companies a mirror image of the BBC.
What a place to live in. It's where my family live.
Spurred on by the example of the BBC, the ITV companies presented viewers with a wide range of quality programmes for over 20 years. But recently, some well-qualified observers have detected a drop in standards, particularly where drama is concerned.
The programme makers, the controllers, are looking for surefire success, and they think they're going to find that by having copies rather than having original ideas. And I don't think that's true. I think that's possibly one of the reasons why the audience for television is going down. And if you look in the top 20, there's very little drama except for the soaps in it, and almost no new drama whatsoever. All series which may be very good of their kind, but have been going for 4 or 5 years. Nothing new. Very depressing.
I sometimes think these days that in many executive offices in ITV, the more required reading is perhaps the latest movement in the share price than an interest in what interesting scripts have we to take home and look at and consider this week.
Of programmes between Channel 3 and Channel 4.
Many people in television are convinced that programme standards will sink even further as the ITV companies struggle to survive in the harsh new world ushered in by the bill. But there are in fact strong grounds for believing that the actual effect on programmes could be much less dramatic than is generally supposed.
I don't think ITV will go down market. It's not in ITV's interest to go down market. It is already accused by the advertisers of being too down market. It's in our interest to make programmes that appeal across the whole range, and that's what I think we'll do. It's in our commercial interest. There'll be plenty of other channels that are aiming for, which will be full of cheap shows, whether they're studio-based talk and game shows or whether they're cheap acquired material, relatively cheap acquired material. Other channels will do that. ITV will be stupid if it went that way.
Don't go changing to try and please me. You never let me down.
Although nothing is certain in the present situation, it's possible that ITV programmes will stay just the way they are for some considerable time. The need to give Channel 3 a strong, viewer-friendly identity in the new multi-channel environment of the 90s means that old favourites may well go on and on. Arthur and Terry could still be bickering as the century draws to a close. But less popular or more demanding series face a much bleaker future. The type of programme that's most at risk of vanishing from ITV screens is peak time current affairs. Although the bill says Channel 3 licensees must make programmes like World in Action, there's no obligation to put them out at peak time. What's more, it's doubtful whether companies will be able to afford such programmes, given the amount they'll have to pay the Treasury in order to gain a licence in the first place.
Across the country, the state of Britain's schools is frightening teachers, parents and children.
There will not be the resources to enable television companies to make programmes that require a good deal of investigation, a good deal of time and trouble, and the bottom line is that nobody who was running a television system that was tuned entirely to commercial interests would make programmes of that sort, because it's much more profitable, much more cost-effective to make cheaper programmes which are more guaranteed rating successes.
I would be sorry if there was no peak time current affairs on ITV. I wouldn't be sorry if there was less of it than there is now, but because I think there are 3 weekly current affairs shows on ITV. There's only 1 on BBC One, so there's an imbalance there already, and they're the public service channel.
Also thought to be at risk as a result of the bill is local programming, particularly the regional news programmes put out by the smaller ITV companies such as Border.
Tonight, 2 men die as this helicopter plunges into a field near Carlisle.
Here again, the bill says such programmes must continue, but there's real concern about whether there'll be enough money around to make them.
Well, it's very worrying because you need quite a bit of cash to make decent news and current affairs. It's actually labour intensive. however you do it, and you need the budget. It has always been the case in ITV that the smaller companies, which can draw on less advertising revenue, have lower budgets for their news and current affairs. But under the new scheme, what worries me is that if there is no network subsidy, there'll be even less money to go into your news and current affairs, and yet your act is going to say that you've got to make it.
Poppycock! Reshuffling makes perfect sense. Now, if you do...
Spitting Image is one of the most popular programmes on British television, and yet it too is threatened by the bill. Perhaps the most innovative and dangerous light entertainment show ever made, Spitting Image has overcome many threats to its survival over the past few years. Its makers believe it might well have been killed off, if not for one far-sighted executive.
Well, the first series wasn't frightfully good. We didn't make it work at all. And it was really stayed on because of Charles Denton, who was the programme controller at Central. I must say, I think it went on because of Charles Denton, and it stayed on because of him. He got behind it because he wanted to do it.
One. His Majesty King Charles sees Christopher Wren.
Oh, no.
Ah, Wren, I wanted to talk to you about this new building thingy. Yeah, St. Paul's. I don't like it, Wren. It's too modern.
I think that the time that we went with Spitting Image to Central, to Denton, was the correct time. I don't think in the present atmosphere Spitting Image could ever get off the ground. So instead of Charles Denton thinking, hey, this is a good idea, we take a traditional thing like caricature, we make the caricatures move, it's just like, you know, he won't be able to do that because a lot will be less of this and more of let's do some market research, let's see whether people are going to like it. Will the advertisers like it?
Peasants can relate to.
ITV insiders confirm that whoever wins the right to broadcast on Channel 3, risky and controversial projects like Spitting Image are unlikely to take root on the channel in the future.
Innovation and risk-taking are very difficult in a commercial television system. You have to do it, because if you don't take risks, you can't find the new programmes that the audiences, that will become big hits with the audience. So you've got to do it. But it's always very much more difficult, because obviously if you invest money on a programme which doesn't work, you've lost it and you've lost your audience. So we have to do it, but it will be confined, I suspect now, much more to commercially useful programming. The risks will be in that area. There will be less risk-taking in ITV, I suspect, across the whole range of programming than there used to be, yes.
With ITV taking even less risks in the 90s, the onus will be on Britain's youngest network, Channel 4, to carry the torch of experiment. In a moment, we'll be asking whether Channel 4's commitment to be different from other channels can survive the government's plans for it. The Broadcasting Bill also proposes major changes to the funding of Channel 4. Up until now, the ITV companies have put up the cash for Channel 4's programmes in return for the right to sell the advertising space in between. The space for the ads that you've just seen was sold by the ITV company in your own region. But the bill proposes turning Channel 4 into a non-profit-making corporation, making programmes and selling its own advertising to cover the cost. The members of the corporation will be appointed by the Independent Television Commission, but they'll have to be approved by the Home Secretary, another controversial proposal. The channel's remit to be innovative and experimental, a legal obligation, remains intact, but there are many who fear it may be eroded by the need to balance the books. So what was Channel 4's original purpose?
Parliament, after a long argument and after the Allen Report and long consideration, began Channel 4 as the fourth commercial channel with a definite remit which came out of the report. The remit said that Channel 4 ought to be distinctive, complementary, innovative, and cater for the minorities.
Well, Channel 4 is a commercial channel. It has advertising in the breaks in programmes, but we don't sell our own advertising. The ITV companies sell the advertising on Channel 4 and they get the revenue from it. And in return, Channel 4 gets, at the beginning of each year, a lump sum of money, which is our secure funding to make programmes for the whole of the year ahead.
Crucial thing about Channel 4 is it does have a very specifically protected financial position. At the end of the day,
its income is guaranteed. It may be fairly fixed and it may be fairly tight, but it's guaranteed. And it will be, under the new legislation, continue to be fixed by a different sum, but it'll continue to be fixed. And I think one of the returns for that is that they have a particular responsibility to put out across a very broad range, and certainly to consider programme applications across a very broad range of programmes which, quite frankly, have no commercial value at all, but clearly have an importance to a particular group of people.
Well, the difference that the broadcasting bill will make, as it's presently proposed, is that Channel 4 itself will sell its own advertising. That was one of the government's fundamental objectives in this broadcasting bill. And although we thought that the original system was ideal for us, we've done some very careful work on projections for the future in the light of this new policy, and we believe that we can continue to do Channel 4's work of being different and distinctive and innovative with that new system.
Well, I think Channel 4 made it very clear that its remit was to address minority audiences, and youth was a minority audience, and it gave us the freedom to think broadly, to try things out, to let music run, the freedom to fail, in other words, and that's what and of course, when you're given the freedom to fail, it quite often doesn't fail, it succeeds, and that's what happened with the Tube.
A number of interesting people in the queue maybe could have... Who are you?
Yes. I'm someone just queuing up.
And what are you going to do?
I think the role Channel 4's had in innovating right across the board in entertainment has been very, very important. I mean, I think the Tube laid down a whole new style in the way the films were shot. I mean, it became a joke, the handheld style, but no one had actually done it like that before. If you judged the success of the Tube by the ratings, you wouldn't have said it was particularly successful, but it reverberated. I judge it partly by the ratings, the success of Big World, because they are going up. It means more people are watching it and choosing to watch it, which means they're enjoying it. And so that is an indication of success. I don't think trying to reach a large number of people with exciting and innovative material, meaning the music, is selling out. I think if we discovered a format like we did with Big World Cafe, which wasn't getting through successfully, to redesign that format to reach people more effectively isn't selling out, as long as your aim's the same, and our aim hasn't changed.
Channel 4's biggest success story has been its Liverpool-based soap opera Brookside. Genuinely innovative, it took soap opera out of the studio, and its realistic style influenced other series, including EastEnders. Now Channel 4 is going to run Brookside 3 nights a week instead of 2.
You've got to take a share of the market to survive. The channel's got to take a share of the market. The channel's existence at the moment is going to be based on 14% of the revenue plus 50% of what they get above there. Now they've got to keep delivering that, you know, and ITV's got to keep delivering its 40 to 45% share in order to pay the channel, you know. And the job of Brookside is to be the kind of channel's flagship program around which they sell everything else. I mean, Brookside brings in something like 5 to 6 times its cost in income, and it's that money that is then put aside to enable all the other things to fulfill the remit for all the kind of so-called innovation and experimentation, you know.
I think that Brookside 3 days a week is a decision absolutely made within the parameters that Channel 4 ought to have. Brookside is a quality product. A third Brookside means not doing a first something else. That's perfectly right. But the channel's schedule has always been a balance between what is established and successful in the channel's own terms, which are not the same as other people's terms, and trying new things.
Remember, mine's Joanne and yours is Kim.
I think Channel 4's original brief was a really enriching thing for television. The big ITV companies and the BBC had been formed in the days of consensus politics and a very monolithic view of what the nation was. Channel 4, just by its very schedule, was offering a way of celebrating the diversity of the nation, diverse reports, things like that. And I think it's really important to hang on to that, not just for some sort of moral, political, utopian idea, but because it works. economically it works, in terms of television it works. Taking those risks, opening up those doors, you're opening up doors to people who will enrich television and enrich the national culture.
I think television has 1,000 vitalities, and all those 1,000 vitalities, or 1,001, ought to be put at the disposal of people who are not of the host culture. So I saw television fulfilling the normal functions on a special basis and not on a concessional basis for the minority populations of Britain.
I'd like to thank B.K. Gill from Wolverhampton, who organised this great petition. He or she writes, "Being a student, it's very difficult to stay up so late and watch Eastern Eye. So to prove my point, I organised a petition which many people signed willingly. I hope it'll have some influence. I'm afraid there's very little we can do, but we'll send it up to the powers that be."
No one believes that such minority programmes will disappear from Channel 4, but some fear that they may be pushed out of the mainstream and into the margins of the schedule.
I doubt very much if Channel 4 will ever abandon its minority remit. I think that programmes for minorities and about minorities will continue to be made. I have every suspicion, though, and sometimes I think Halfway to Paradise is proof of that suspicion, that they will be increasingly marginalised, pushed further and further into the ghettos of the night, pushed further and further into periods of programming and scheduling that are not part of perceived to be the popular mainstream.
Well, one of the cheering things is I think advertisers are not just interested in numbers now, they're getting more sophisticated, they're interested in who's watching and the quality of the viewing, because I think research has shown that people who are appreciating a programme actually take more notice of the adverts around it than the broad mass audience who are just watching the game show. So I think that's helpful, because if Channel 4 latch on to that, and it's in the way the advertising is already placed on Channel 4 reflects that, so you're going for narrow casting to target audiences, that puts a sort of brake on going for a mass audience and selling out to high ratings. I don't think that will ever be part of Channel 4's brief, and I don't think the advertisers would want it to be. I don't think they want 20 million watching on Channel 4. I think they'd rather have 6 million committed viewers of a certain kind, than they know what they're selling to.
I think the channel is now moving towards a much more advertising-led concept of defining its audience, and it's much more to do with, if you like, minority targeting. So that would be, in a sense, people that fall within certain age groups, or people that are, you know, at home within a particular period of time, people that fall into a certain kind of consumer group, and it tends to be led more by those senses of consumerism rather than by your cultural place. And, you know, both of those two things can take you into kind of odd extremes.
But there is a concern that in the effort to satisfy advertisers, the channel's definition of minority could be subtly shifting.
I think the Mushroom Show is wonderful. I think that's great. But, you know, if that's what we're saying, that's our minority television, then that's clearly not what was intended. The interesting one, I think, is all the business service programs. I mean, obviously, shareholders and share investors are a minority, and they're being very well serviced, thank you, by ITV and indeed by London Weekend and Thames and so on. Whether or not they are quite the minorities that were meant in the original remit, I would certainly doubt.
Sustaining its original remit will probably be a much greater hardship for it, because it's in direct competition with other sorts of programme scheduling. And at that stage, I think that there's a very real crisis of identity for the channel.
We'll be back in a moment to take up some of these issues. In the meantime, here's another set of advertisers in search of a suitable target audience. The Broadcasting Bill has already provoked passionate responses on either side of the debate. Are we staring into the abyss of ever lower standards on British television, or standing on the threshold of a brave new dawn? With me tonight to discuss the key issues in the bill are Chief Executive of Channel 4, Michael Grade. When at the BBC, Grade publicly advocated the privatisation of Channel 4, but since taking over the reins, he claims to have seen the light. Richard Dunn is chairman of the ITV Association and managing director of Thames Television, one of the biggest ITV companies. He's led the ITV campaign against the government's plans to sell franchises to the highest bidder. Stuart Cosgrove is one of the new breed of independent producers created in the wake of the setting up of Channel 4. His Glasgow-based production company, Big Star in a Wee Picture, describes itself as a maker of popular television programmes. Liz Howell is currently Deputy Director of Programmes at one of ITV's smallest companies, Border Television, based in Carlisle, but not for long. At the end of the year, she leaves to join Sky News, Rupert Murdoch's satellite television empire, which is seen by many inside ITV as the enemy. Adrian Birchall is Vice Chairman and Executive Media Director of leading advertising agency Darcy Macias Benton & Bowles. Birchall's agency has been responsible for selling us a wide range of products, from Bisto to Clearasil. And finally, Chento Valinovsky is the editor of Freedom in Broadcasting and the research and editorial director of the Institute of Economic Affairs, the influential right-wing think tank, which has seen many of its ideas turned into political reality by the Thatcher government. Richard Dunn, if I can start with you, the main area of concern is this quality threshold. What is the quality threshold?
Well, the quality threshold in the bill sets out the first stage by which ITV companies or Channel 3 would-be licensees apply for their franchises. And it's a two-stage process. First, you have to prove that you can put up a satisfactory quality schedule and that you've got the business plans and the wherewithal to do so. And those that get through the quality threshold, or the Beecher's Brook hurdle, are then into a bidding round, a second stage, and the highest financial bid placed in the brown envelope wins the contract.
But what counts as quality? Is Blind Date quality?
Oh, I think Blind Date would be a quality programme of its type. But what quality is in the eye of the beholder, it is not quantifiable, and it's very difficult to see how people who want to bid for these licenses will judge quality. They will have to make a judgment as to what the ITC thinks is quality, and I suppose what they will look at the BBC performance and schedules, and they will look at the track record of ITV companies over the years, and that will be, I think, the benchmark for quality.
Adrian Birchall, you've written a paper about the meaning of quality. What is quality?
Well, we try and see quality from the point of view of the viewer, because at the end of the day, whatever guidelines you set up, there's got to be some kind of monitoring on a regular basis. And we think that once you look at how the viewer sees quality, and we've set up three ideas. One is, does the viewer actually watch the programme? Secondly, is the cross-section of the population watching the programme? And thirdly, does the viewer actually like the programme?
If the viewer doesn't watch the programme, a programme that gets small ratings, does that mean it's not quality?
No, I mean, no, it isn't, because there's a combination of factors. And also, I think it's important to stress that in the paper that we put up for discussion, we were not talking about individual programmes, we're basically talking about an overall schedule of programmes, where we want to see if the people are watching that channel, whether there is a cross-section of people watching the channel, and whether they like the programmes on that channel. We think that's a measure of quality at the output end, as well as a measure of quality in terms of diversity and range, which are important at the input end.
In your view, is ITV giving quality now?
Not as much as one would like. I mean, I think the ITV contractors must be somewhat disappointed with their performance over the last 5 or 10 years in this country. We had a picture in 1978 where ITV had 53% of the audience. It's now got 41% of the audience. Now, even if you add in Channel 4 with 9%, the combined ITV and Channel 4 is at 50%, is less than it was in 1978 when it was 53%. Also, and it's been well documented elsewhere, the ITV audience tends to be older and more down market than it really should be. So a lot of what's in ITV is very good, don't get me wrong, but it could be a lot better.
Chento Valinovsky, do you think that once this bill comes into effect, we're going to see better quality on ITV?
Quality is not in the eye of the beholder in television, it's in the eye of the viewer. And that is the central feature of the government's proposals. I don't think they've gone far enough, but it's viewer choice. And on our two programmes that we saw earlier, we only talked to producers and ITV executives, not the viewer. We didn't hear what they thought about this scheme or what they thought the future of television is going to be. And I think that's a crucial difference. It's viewer choice, not producer choice.
How much further would you have liked to have seen the bill gone?
Well, I would have taken into account the fact that we have the BBC with 2 channels one of which, BBC One, is acting almost as if it were an advertiser-supported channel. In fact, the advertisers would much prefer that audience profile than the ITV audience profile. So I would have swapped the remits from Channel 4 to BBC One and allowed Channel 4 to be privatised as Michael Grade had originally proposed and let it rip. And so you would have a commercial sector that was thoroughly commercial, provided the advertisers with a service, and you would have a public service organisation that actually provided genuinely public service programmes that catered for this sort of paternalistic aspect of broadcasting that people feel that it should be imposed on the British broadcasting system. And it is that sort of rejigging of the system that can give you more competition within the 4-channel system without at the same time lowering quality standards, because you have an organisation, the British Broadcasting Corporation, committed to quality broadcasting. Now people say that will turn it into a cultural ghetto, but if everyone's right that quality is going to plummet, it will turn it into a cultural oasis for people who want to watch quality broadcasting.
Liz Howell, are we going to see wider choice?
I don't suppose you are going to see wider choice, no, and I think there's been some very strange things said here already. For a start, if the point of the bill is to make us provide higher quality programming, why is so much of the revenue being taken away and given to the Treasury so we can't put it back into programme making? Also, the question of Channel 4, if the ITV companies can no longer sell the advertising for Channel 4, but they have to support it financially, which I understand they do, that is also going to be a terrible burden on these companies. And I don't think you're going to see the money going back into the programming, as the bill seems to hope it would. There are so many funny things going on. I mean, if you read the Common Select Committee report on the broadcasting of Parliament, it is full of demands to see more backbench MPs on regional television. Yet in the bill, they take away the wherewithal to let us do that, which is the financing. It's all very difficult to understand, I think. I'm sure Richard Dunn would agree. If you're sitting in ITV trying to work it out, you can't be sure what it is they're trying to say to us. Make better programmes, put more MPs on TV, but not with as much money. How are we supposed to do it?
I'm astounded to hear Cento propose advertising on the BBC and in the same breath say that give the viewers what they want. I bet you if you poll the viewers, the last thing in the world they want to see is advertising on the BBC.
That's not what I was suggesting. I was suggesting changing Channel 4's programming remit to BBC One and allowing Channel 4 to continue as a advertiser-supported channel without government protection.
What do you need to destabilise a system like that for? I mean, that's not...
Because you have 2 channels of the public service broadcasting
channel. It's a very
channel.
Convoluted way to privatise the BBC. It's a bargain.
No, not privatise the BBC, you maintain it. I mean, the government's plans will maintain the BBC intact as it is now. What I'm suggesting is make it a genuine public service broadcast and not have a lot of mass audience programmes that could be shown and be commercially viable on Channel 4 or ITV.
Could we come back to the real world? Because whilst it's academically of interest what Cento thinks, what we've got is a broadcasting bill on its way to an Act of Parliament. And it's not going to be that way. It's going to be the way broadly that's set out in the bill. And it's not a bad bill. It's a lot better as a bill than the white paper. And we have no objection in the ITV Association to competitive tendering. But I think the carbuncle on the bill, the flaw in this bill, is the insistence that the highest financial bid must win. I think that is a confusion. I think what the government wants is to introduce new blood into the ITV companies, but also to have continuity.
Richard, if you did get the franchise and you didn't have to make public service broadcasting, the drama, the documentaries, the educational, the children's, the religious, would you still do it?
Oh, I think that some of the points that have been made about advertisers and their requirements for quality programmes are quite right. It's difficult to know because we'll be subject to the pressures of advertising support, and the advertisers might want more ratings, and I might want more advertising income, but we'll be subject to those pressures from advertisers, competitive pressures in the marketplace, whether the government does anything or not, and subject to the regulations that the government is putting on us. And I think all of that will combine to reduce somewhat the public service.
The problem with measuring quality under the auction system is that the money isn't available. to provide programmes of quality, because you're always going to get some egomaniac in the media tycoon who's going to come in and pay way over the odds. I mean, you look at what people do with football clubs. They throw millions of pounds at. I mean, the Times newspaper, for example, is not a commercial proposition, but there are people who wish to run newspapers like that because of the power and so on.
There's a very clear case in point there. In Scotland, one of the fears, or at least one of the rumours, is that Murray International Metals, who are the owners of Glasgow Rangers, will be putting together a media bid for what is currently the Scottish TV franchise. So there could be the prospect that a subsidiary of Glasgow Rangers would own independent Scottish television, which, I mean, it's a frightening thought. Alloa Athletic I could handle, but Glasgow Rangers is a slightly more worrying thought.
But the money's all going to go. If you ask the viewers what they want more, better, good, lovely programmes, which means more money. And if you ask the viewers, if you talk about real viewer choice, the viewers would rather the money went into programmes than it got snaffled by the Treasury.
But Michael, the viewers aren't a homogenous group of people, are they? I mean, the viewers are also formed by their culture, their experience, their class, their race, their gender. I mean, they actually break down to smaller groups. Now, will those smaller groups be catered for, or will it always be this homogenous idea of the viewer?
It always comes back to funding, and if the remits of Channel 4, the remit of ITV, the regional remit of Channel 3, the BBC's public service and so on, if all the philosophies in the world for each of those channels are a complete waste of time if the money isn't there to pay for the programmes to make them. The BBC is starved of money. The BBC got a terrible economic squeeze on their hands. The government are punishing them viciously with the kind of restrictions on the licence fee that are going on at the moment. They're going to take all the money out of ITV and snaffle it in the Treasury, and there's quite a squeeze, although we're reasonably happy with the funding formula for Channel 4, there's quite a squeeze on us as well.
But can I just come back on this point about money, because there isn't clearly a perfect correlation between amount of money and quality, because you made the point about BBC being squeezed. The gap between the ITV revenue and the BBC money from licence fee has widened dramatically over the last few years. Yet over that period, BBC's audiences have grown compared with ITV, and in fact the demographics of the BBC audience is better than ITV.
But if you've run both BBC channels as I have, and you have to put those schedules together, by about March you've run out of money, and from March to September BBC One and BBC Two are reduced to endless repeats, which is not the corporation's fault. They're absolutely starved of money, and I think the viewers are entitled to new programmes between March and September on the BBC.
Please, could I come in here, because I think we're in danger of sounding terribly smug, as if everything that ITV in particular, because that's what we're talking about in the main, has ever produced has all been at the standard of Brideshead Revisited. Now, that isn't true. That there is evidence to show there's been misspending and profligacy in ITV, and I think we've got to accept that. In the past that was the case. Also, there was a terrible uneven distribution of programming quality, if you like, across ITV. For example, when I started as head of news at Border in 1986, I had one film crew for the evening news programme. That wasn't Border's fault, it was the fault of the system. And it certainly isn't thanks to the system that we've now got 7 tape cameras on the road to make the evening news programme and therefore make better quality programmes. It's not thanks to the system, it's thanks to a dedicated group of workers and managers who want to make that station work. But we are talking as if everything ITV's ever done has been great, and that's because we've had loads of money to do it with. That isn't the case, and I think we can sound very smug, and we shouldn't. I'd also like to say on the point about Channel 4, in a way, you don't have to respond to the advertisers to the same extent, because no one expects you to get a mass advertising response.
But you have to understand, forgive me, you have to understand that the advertisers, the interests of the advertisers and the interests of the viewers do not always coincide. They do some of the time. And what we concentrate on Channel 4 is obviously providing programmes that the viewers and the advertisers want, but we are also there to provide programmes that the marketplace, the advertising marketplace, cannot deliver. And that's the real niche role for Channel 4 in the future.
Are they going to go on being served once you have to sell your own advertising? I mean, Adrian, are you happy with the Channel 4 audience as it is at the moment?
well, let's say we're very happy with the remit. We think we're delighted the remit should be kept.
But the audiences are tiny.
The audiences are very valuable to advertisers. The fact that they are tiny, to use your expression, is quite attractive to some advertisers. So I think we're quite happy with that. I think
you mean programmes like Stuart's Halfway to Paradise, which has a very small audience, is attractive to an advertiser?
Yes, it's attractive to some advertisers because it means that the particular audience that watches that programme, it could be very important to a certain advertiser, where in the past they had to go into a large rating programme on ITV to get to the same audience and have therefore quite a lot of wastage. So it becomes very attractive.
So you wouldn't like to see the Channel 4 audiences become larger. You wouldn't like to see Channel 4 becoming more commercial and pandering more to the advertisers.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I'd like to see the audiences larger. I'd like to see more people watching Channel 4. I think most people would involved with the channel. From where we sit, Channel 4 has got I would be very optimistic about Channel 4's future. I mean, we did a calculation that by 19...
there does, and bringing Michael in here, there does seem to be some disquiet about the nature of things that, you know, have been going on. There's a decrease in the amount of money being put up for multicultural programming. Bandung File, which has been a flagship programme, is coming to an end. My own programme, Halfway to Paradise, has been scheduled at midnight, whereas previously it had been, you know, much more highly thought of. And it does seem that there is a kind of diminution, really, of some of those kinds of minority targets.
I'd much rather talk about... we really don't want to get into a debate, do we, about this week's schedule on
no,
Channel 4.
But it's not. I was using that as an example.
Can I just say something?
Another argument, Michael. It wasn't about the scheduling,
No.
it's about the nature of people's concern about what happens to a specific understanding of minorities.
But I mean, I could trade you 18,000 examples here and now of programmes that have been promoted into peak time. So we're going to get into a silly argument. I'm more worried about the political control of Channel 4. This is an issue of very, very grave concern.
Hang on a second, just before we go on to the political control thing, are you completely happy that once you're selling your own advertising, Michael, you can continue serving the remit as you do now, not going to consumer minorities, but sticking with cultural minorities?
Absolutely. That's why we have argued so strongly for a secure and adequate funding base.
And you believe the advertisers will be interested in that?
I think enough advertisers will be interested in enough of our programmes, as they are now, for us to survive and to continue to do the most extraordinary things at the corner, and to enable us, like we did last night, to clear 6.5 hours to show Peter Brook's Marbarata.
What's your worst scenario of what might politically happen under this new legislative control of the channel then? I mean, just moving on to the point you're going to make.
Well, my worst concern is when David Mellor, the Minister of State, said the other day that the only reason they'd put this in was that we were now a public corporation with public service, with a public service remit, and that the ITC would propose people for membership of the board, but the government would only knock them back if they were deemed unsuitable. That was the word he used. Now, this immediately sends flashing red lights into my head. I worry very greatly why the government should suddenly want to introduce an element of political control into Channel 4. It's never had it up to now. The board of Channel 4 has always been appointed by the IBA. I think it's up to the government now to explain publicly and give a very good reason as to why they suddenly have decided that they want to veto, a political veto, on the people who will control Channel 4.
See, I suspect that at the centre of the broadcasting bill there is a fundamental contradiction. That's, you know, a contradiction that I think that you proposed earlier, which, on the one hand, the government, in very Thatcherite ways, is proposing a much wider and freer economic marketplace where people have to compete for, you know, advertising, for choice, etc. But creeping into the bill is the idea of a clearer ideological control. So the idea of the government stepping out from broadcasting to allow the market of television to determine itself is in lots of ways simply at the economic level, not at the level of control or ideology or whatever. And it seems that that's fundamentally flawed in terms of your notions of freedom.
Yes, there are obviously two tensions here. One is the opening up the markets, and we haven't obviously talked about satellite television and cable television, which are coming on the horizon and making that technological push towards greater competition, greater viewer choice. And then we have this political dimension, but it seems a bit, to me, inconsistent for Michael Gray to want to have all these protective sheaths put around him and then say, government, go away. I mean, if he wants freedom from government, then he should ask to be privatised and get out of the government sector.
I'm
it's
not
one of
asking,
the necessary sort of costs of being in that public service
I'm not asking
broadcasting
for total freedom. I'm asking
sector.
I'm asking that the government continue the present arrangement, which is the body that it itself appoints, the IBA, and its successor, the ITC, should make the appointments.
I mean, just avoid getting bogged down in the detail of that, because Michael touches on an important point, and I think that he's right that it would be very helpful for the government to explain in much more detail why they seek this particular kind of control. But don't let's lose sight of the fact that you won't have a Channel 4 and a Channel 4 remit during the 90s unless it's hooked to a stable and successful Channel 3.
Yes.
And that is why the appointment of the licensees on Channel 3 and the climate in which they operate is going to be vital not only to Channel 4, also to Channel 5, and the stability between the BBC and the commercial sector.
Is it anything to do with this changing climate in ITV that you're leaving and going to Sky?
Well, it's more to do with the changing climate in satellite television, I think, because they asked me to go. They asked me to go there. ITV didn't ask me to leave. I think that satellite television provides a great opportunity, and one of the things that I like about it, which touches on this regional point, is that it's strangely non-metropolitan. They actually have a policy that you don't say back to London in the studio, and that appeals to me. Also, the Australians are not so metropolitan dominated in their outlook as we are. I mean, Canberra is not the name of a city that trips off your tongue, is it?
Can I pick up on that? Because Richard used the term the regional ITV networks, and I think that an awful lot of people in Scotland feel quite patronised by that, not by Richard, but by the notion of Scotland being perceived, for example, as a region when it clearly is a nation and needs a national broadcasting coherent policy for itself, and that one of the things about this bill is not what it says but what it doesn't say. The bill doesn't even go as far as to offer any statutory legislation that Channel 5, the next channel, would be sited outside London.
Why would you like Channel 5 to be in Scotland?
I think I'd like Channel 5 to be in Scotland for one very simple reason, and that's that I think that the whole weight of broadcasting in Britain is outrageously metropolitan. The assumptions that are made from London, and sometimes
surely not.
I should point out.
I can't believe on one point.
I should point out that Channel 4 is more popular in Scotland than in any other part of the British Isles. We're disproportionately popular in Scotland, so we can't be that metropolitan.
When Channel 5 eventually happens, and there is no date for it in the bill, what do you think the effect of it will be on Channel 4?
Nothing for a long, long time. I think it's very problematic, Channel 5. There are all kinds of very expensive engineering problems that have to be solved. I think it's many years away yet, and I think it's going to strike. There's going to be an awful break on its growth. The fact that it isn't in the southeast, you've got to retune VCR machines. There's a huge cost. I don't think it's the great gold mine that people think it is. I personally do hope that it will not be anywhere near London, because I think that would be a major step forward for British broadcasting.
Adrian Birchall, as an advertiser, what sort of effect are you hoping Channel 5 will have?
Well, we obviously hope that Channel 5, I'm more optimistic than Michael, will succeed and provide more choice to the viewers and audiences for the advertisers.
And yet, isn't it going to split your audiences so that your actual cost per thousand of advertising is going to be much more expensive?
Well, the reason advertising will become more expensive would be if these new channels took their audience largely from ITV. What we're hoping is that the present situation of about 50% of the audience of the commercial sector increases. If we can get up to 55–60% of the viewing to the commercial sector, that has the big effect on the cost per thousand.
My prediction is that if the government have their way with the auction and many of the other timetable of the bill and so on, all the ITV companies potentially going out of business on one day, on January the 1st, 1993. My prediction, whatever happens on the current legislation, is that the BBC will pick up at least 5 to 10% of the audience in 1993 and 1994. So it's the worst deal in the world for the advertisers.
Adrian, if that's true, you are going to be well and truly stuck. I mean, this bill partly came about because the advertisers put pressure on Thatcher to break the monopoly that ITV had. If, as Michael says, the BBC increase their audience share and Channel 5 comes in and there's all the satellite and BSB and Sky and you split your audience, you've sort of shot yourselves in the foot, haven't you?
Well, no, I disagree. I don't agree with the assumption that ITV could fall apart on January 1993. I think there will be a strong element of continuity. I think the BBC will make some headway, and I think obviously...
Every time there's been a franchise round, ITV's audience has dropped.
Every time.
Every time.
Initially,
and
yes.
Initially, yes.
Yeah.
And this time, just think about it for a second. 15 ITV companies could go out of business on one day. Is that potential for continuity in the business? That's a recipe for catastrophe.
Well, they could do, but it's highly unlikely that...
Why is it highly unlikely? Read the bill.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you all very much indeed. Next week, we'll be back with our last show before the Christmas break. And Christmas just wouldn't be Christmas without Snow White, Dumbo and 101 Dalmatians. We'll be bringing you an exclusive interview with Disney chairman Jeff Katzenberg.